There are 5 things that you need to do before even thinking about starting a business or becoming an entrepreneur. Do these 5 things and your chances of success go up exponentially, but ignore them and join the 80% of businesses that fail. I don't want that for you, especially when it's avoidable just by doing these things. All right, let's get to them. Starting a business isn't easy, and anybody that tells you otherwise obviously has never started one before, or they were just born with a horseshoe somewhere. After all, the statistics, they ain't pretty. Somewhere around 8 out of 10 businesses failing, or 9 out of 10 businesses failing, or even if we say half of businesses fail, still not a very good proposition, especially when starting a business takes so much time, energy, and money, and a lot of mental toil, and a lot of long days, and even longer nights. So if you just take a look at the numbers alone and just at the statistics, well, it might be kind of off-putting. It might make you wonder, why would anybody even start a business? And why are you even considering this? Why are you watching this now? Well, my friend, the answer is because when you do start a business, especially when it becomes successful, when it becomes profitable, there's probably no better feeling that I've ever had than starting and building multiple different profitable and successful businesses. And I want that for you too. But the only way that I can give you any chance of actually making that happen is by making sure that you're properly informed and educated on these things to give yourself the highest likelihood of success. So whether you're just starting now, whether you're just thinking about starting a business, whether you're in your first year or even your first few years, looking at these tips, looking at these strategies and thinking, how can I apply them to where I'm at right now will give you such a tremendous advantage. I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, these are the things that I wish I had years ago when I started my first business that would have saved me countless hours, countless frustrating nights and long weekends, and basically a ton of time that I wasted trying to figure this all out for myself. So with all that said, let's dive into tip number 1, which is to get better where you are. I know they say hindsight is 20/20, and it's really easy to look back at history and say, oh man, think of all the things that I could have done different or could have done better. But the reality is that who I am today is a completely different person than who I was a decade ago. And had I just known all the things that I know now, well, it would have drastically improved and shortened my learning curve and my path to success. You see, a decade ago, and even 2 decades ago, if we're really honest, I don't want to say that I was lazy, but I certainly wasn't as driven and as motivated as I am now. I mean, sure, I did a good job, did a great job even, but I didn't do an outstanding job, an unbelievable job, a job that made people turn their heads and wonder, wow, what is this guy doing? And the reality is that level of impressing yourself and other people at just how amazing you are, well, that's the kind of level that you're going to need to reach and to achieve in order to really thrive and succeed and do an amazing job when starting your own business. Long story short, but I used to be a business jet captain, so I would fly rich people all around the world and get to travel to some pretty amazing places. And I had a mentor back in those days who was telling me directly, in no uncertain terms, that I was pretty much just wasting my time. Because when we would land, I mean, sure, I would clean up the plane, make sure everything was good for our next flight, update the logs and the books and all the stuff you have to do when you're a pilot, but then I would relax. Sure, I would read the odd business book and I'd listen to inspirational materials, but I wasn't grinding and I wasn't hustling and I wasn't really giving myself all of the advantage that I could have with the amount of downtime that I had. The fact of the matter is that I had an amazing opportunity to try to get way better right there, right then, right where I was. Things didn't need to change. Even if I was already working 12 or 14 hours a day, there was still a ton of time after that to read, to study, to try to improve, and to try to do it focused and deliberately with the intention of becoming the absolute best version of myself. Now, naturally, this is something that I do today and I've been doing for the last decade, but imagine just how much further I could be along had I started even a decade before that. And that's why it doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing, the time to start is now. You see, there's another funny thing that happens when you adopt this mentality of trying to do everything that you can with what you have and where you are right now. And that it really forces you to level up your game, which changes you at a deep, deep level. And this isn't limited to just other professionals or other pilots or other people in basically any kind of job. It has to do with every job. If you're a lifeguard, it means being a better lifeguard. If you're a fry cook, it means being a better fry cook. If you're a waiter or a waitress, it means being the best server that you possibly can. No exceptions ever. When you adopt this mentality of excellence in everything that you do, your whole life changes. You start to notice, you start to feel better and become more self-confident, but other people start to notice and they start to see your confidence as well. And it's unmistakable and it's unavoidable that when you have this mentality of doing everything to the absolute best of your ability, there's nowhere to go but up. And the beauty of this is that it doesn't cost any money. All it takes is an attitude change, a behavior change, and the willingness to understand that you can start to get better today. And these habits are going to carry you well forward into starting your own business or becoming an entrepreneur, where they're not just nice to have, they're mandatory. Something that almost nobody talks about when it comes to starting a business or becoming an entrepreneur is the 100% level of accountability that you have yourself. There's nobody coming to save you. There's no one coming to help you. And unless you build a team around you, which of course you should do eventually, well, unless you've got those people, it's pretty much up to you. The buck really does stop with you, which means you've got to hold yourself to the highest standard possible. All right, the next thing that you want to do before even thinking about starting a business or becoming an entrepreneur is to stack that cash. When it comes to starting a business, depending on what kind of business you're thinking about starting, there's a number of different models available. There's incredibly cost-intensive ones and things that are just gonna drain a ton of cash, like any kind of retail business or restaurant or anything that requires a large amount of infrastructure or materials or anything like that. But there's also a cost to these free or online or nomadic or digital type businesses that you have to just run from your laptop. Even they are gonna require some kind of cash. Even if you already have a laptop and a cell phone, which obviously you've got one of those two things if you're watching this video here, well, even if you've already got the raw materials required, you're still going to need a little bit of cash for things like possibly a website, possibly a branded domain to get emails from, possibly some basic branding or some basic incorporation or registration of your business. And then of course, the important stuff like food and shelter and all of the other things that you're going to need to live. The very first business that I started took months before it started generating any income whatsoever. The second one was a little quicker, and the fourth one was profitable within the first few weeks, but this took years to kind of crack the code and really figure out how to generate revenue. And if it's your very first business, you need to make sure that you've got a sufficient cash reserve to live on for 3, 6, 9, maybe even 12 months. If this sounds totally outrageous and there's no way you're going to be able to save up 9 or 12 months of living expenses, I appreciate that. But then what you're probably going to want to do is look for a part-time job that's going to enable you to cover your basic living expenses, which I'd suggest cutting way back as well, and then working the part-time job at the same time that you work your new business or your side hustle until your side hustle can become your main hustle. Obviously, different people, different places that you live, different businesses, they're going to require different levels of cash. So there's no real one-size-fits-all thing here that I can suggest to you, saying you need $5,000 or $10,000 or $500. It's just totally subjective and totally depends on where you're at. One thing I can tell you though with absolute certainty is that more cash gives you more courage because you're not going to be as dependent or as needy on that next customer or that next client, which is going to allow you to operate from a position of authority and integrity and really serving the customer to their best interest, which probably not surprisingly is going to allow your business to do even better. All right, so on the topic of stacking that cash and building up the reserve and talking about a side hustle, my best recommendation for you is to actually treat your new business and your new venture as just that, a side hustle, as a bit of a supplement to your primary business until you can sort of get it off the ground. I get so many messages and inspirational quotes from people who are ready to quit their jobs and go out and follow their dreams and start their own business. But my suggestion here is to slow down. Like slow way, way down. First of all, the odds are pretty good that you don't need to quit your current job in order to start your new side business. There's evenings, there's weekends, there's early mornings. There's a lot of time that's probably being wasted or at least misspent if your main goal, your main dream is to start your own business. The second thing is that if this is your very first business that you've ever started, you're going to be shocked at just how much longer it's going to take than you originally thought. If you think you're going to be up and off the ground running in 3 months, it's probably going to take 6. If you think it's going to take just $5,000 to start, it's probably going to take 10. And if you think you're going to be able to get your very first 10 paying customers in 2 weeks, probably going to take 4 weeks or 6 weeks, maybe even 8 weeks. Some of these things are well within your control and you can absolutely speed up the time frame by working harder, working faster, and enlisting the right help and coaches and consultants and mentors and friends and family even. But some things just take time. You're going to need to set up meetings with accountants and with lawyers, and you're going to be operating on their schedule, and clients or customers are going to vary depending on what time of year, what season it's in. There's a lot of factors that are just outside of your control that you really need to account for. This is why my best advice here is to stay where you're at. Do the best job that you possibly can within the context of whatever it is that you're working. Start your side hustle on the side, but start it now, knowing that it's going to take that time to build up and to really get some traction. All right, my next tip here is to train your brain. Who I am today is so fundamentally different than 5, 10, especially 20 years ago, that it literally makes my head spin. I guess not literally, figuratively makes my head spin. Metaphorically? Truthfully, I barely even recognize the person that I was a decade ago, much less longer than that, because of all of the work that I've put in, the study, the personal development, the coaches, the mentors, the consultants, everything that I've done to try to make myself the best business person, best entrepreneur possible. How I think, how I feel, how I act, all of those things today are so completely different than where it was. It's not even funny. And all of this has to do with this relentless drive and desire to constantly be improving every single area of my life. I've stood toe-to-toe with billionaires, negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts, and grown 4 businesses from nothing to something. And the way I did that was through a brutal, ruthless, and relentless commitment to never-ending self-improvement. I've read a book every single week for the last 8 years, and every single day I dedicate an enormous amount of time to learning, to studying, to growing, and to doing everything that I can to become the best version of myself. I know it sounds super cheesy and super fake even to say, look, just focus on yourself and study and learn and read. But the reality is that good inputs will lead to good outputs. So if you want to be able to build something meaningful, you've got to get some good information, some good inspiration, and some good motivation in and do it regularly. But probably from all of that, the single most important element was the fact that I worked hard, really, really hard. Which leads me to my next tip, and something you definitely want to prepare for before even thinking of starting a business or becoming an entrepreneur, is to brace for impact and prepare to work very, very obnoxiously hard. In the early days of starting my very first business, I put in 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I did this for years. I worked all day. I worked evenings. I worked weekends. I worked every single vacation for most of the vacation. And this is a little embarrassing to admit, but I never took more than 3 days off over an entire 8-year period of growing all my businesses. I'm not suggesting you do the same, and certainly not saying that it was healthy. It cost me way too much in regards to relationships and health and definitely my sanity. But if you really want to succeed, if you really want to join that top echelon of top performers, this is the kind of work ethic that you're going to need to have, because this is the kind of work ethic your competition has. Whether we're talking about me or anyone else in this industry or in pretty much any industry, the absolute top performers work really, really hard. So again, I'm certainly not advocating this incredibly extreme work schedule of the 12 to 16 hour days, 7 days a week for years. You've got to find what works for you, and you've got to be fair to your friends and to your family who need you. On the other hand, it's really hard to argue with success, and I have no doubt that I would not be where I am today without all of that struggle, without all of that fight, and without all of that drive. This is the same reason that I'll never work with a client who needs motivation, because I can't motivate you. That has to come internally. I can give you strategies and tools and tactics, and I can give you business models and all of the structure you need to succeed, but that inner fire, that inner drive, that has to come from you. The most important thing that you need to have before starting a business and before becoming an entrepreneur is that you have to want it bad, and you've got to be willing to work for it even harder. All right, a bonus tip here to really give yourself the greatest chance of success when it comes to starting a business and becoming an entrepreneur is you really need to focus on mastering marketing. This is because marketing is responsible for generating leads, generating customers, and generating sales. It is the activity that is going to drive the revenue and the profits for your business, which is why the very next thing you're going to want to do is check out the video I have linked up right here on Introduction to Marketing. So make sure to check that out now, and I'll see you in the next episode. As I fell in love with marketing years ago when I first got interested in figuring out why people buy and act the way they do, and later how to influence and